Imagine strangers dressed as cops banging on your door, shouting HOA rules. Then one crosses the line. He lays a hand on my wife. They thought they had power. They didn't know I was a Navy SEAL. That night, their fake badges shattered, just like their faces. Our street looked like something out of a postcard. Perfectly trimmed lawns, kids riding their bikes, and neighbors waving while walking their dogs. The kind of neighborhood where nothing ever seemed out of place. After years of deployments, moving from base to base, I had promised my wife that we'd finally settle down somewhere quiet, somewhere safe. That's why we chose this neighborhood. It wasn't supposed to be the kind of place where trouble knocked on your door. My name doesn't matter much, but what does is that I served as a Navy SEAL for over a decade. I've seen chaos in war zones across the world, and when I hung up the uniform, I thought I'd left all that behind. All I wanted was peace to grill in the backyard, teach my kids to swim, and let my wife finally live without worrying every time I walked out the door. My wife, Sarah, was the heart of our home. She had a way of bringing light into any room she entered, even after all the years of sacrifice and separation my service had demanded from her. For her, this neighborhood was supposed to be the reward for waiting through every long deployment, every missed holiday. At first, things were normal. The real HOA would send the occasional notice about trash bins or mailbox paint. Nothing unusual. But slowly, there were things I couldn't ignore. Strangers hanging around too long, notes slipped under the door claiming rules I'd never heard of, cars parked where they didn't belong. Sarah noticed it first. Something feels off. She told me one evening, worry in her eyes. I brushed it off with a laugh, telling her not to worry. But I should have listened. It started with letters. Not the official kind. Not with letterhead or signatures, just cheap printer paper stuffed into our mailbox. Bold black letters screamed things like, "Violation lawn too long," or, "Warning, unauthorized decorations." Except our lawn was trimmed, and the only decoration we had was a small American flag by the porch. At first, I crumpled the notes and tossed them without a second thought. The real HOA already had their processes. Formal envelopes, stamped return addresses. These papers were different, anonymous, almost desperate. But the notes kept coming. Every few days, new accusations, parking violations, unapproved fencing, even a claim that our porch light was too bright. They were absurd, almost laughable, and yet there was something unsettling about the persistence. Someone was watching. Then came the patrols. At night, Sarah would peek through the blinds and spot men walking the sidewalks in pairs. They wore dark jackets and carried flashlights, scanning driveways like they were security guards. But their uniforms didn't match. Their badges were cheap plastic, and no one in the neighborhood recognized them. Neighbors whispered. At the mailbox, Mrs. Carter from across the street muttered, "They came to my door last night, demanding a fine. Said they were from the HOA. But I checked. The HOA doesn't know who they are." She shook her head, fear written all over her face. Sarah grew tense, double-checking the locks every evening. She hated confrontation, but I could see the unease growing in her eyes. "These people aren't normal," she said quietly one night, watching the shadow of two figures pass by our window. "They're not just some kids playing dress-up." I put an arm around her and told her not to worry. "They're wannabes," I said, trying to sound confident. "Probably just con men looking to scare folks." But the truth was gnawing at me. In the teams, we were trained to recognize patterns, to trust instincts. And every instinct I had told me, this wasn't going to stop with silly notes or fake patrols. Something was building. Something ugly. It was a Saturday afternoon when the knock came. Not a polite tap, not even the impatient pounding of a delivery driver. This was the kind of knock meant to rattle your bones, sharp and deliberate, shaking the doorframe with each strike. Sarah froze in the kitchen, her hands still wet from washing dishes. "Who could that be?" she whispered. I already knew. We'd both seen the patrols getting bolder, lingering longer, staring at our house like it was a target. I opened the door and there they stood. 3 men, dressed in mismatched uniforms. Black tactical pants, knockoff police belts, and cheap nylon shirts with patches that looked like they were bought off eBay. Their badges gleamed, but up close you could see the plastic edges, flimsy and fake. "Homeowner," The tallest one barked, his voice straining with authority he didn't have. "You're in violation of multiple HOA rules. We're here to enforce compliance." I raised an eyebrow. "Really? Since when does the HOA send rent-a cops to my doorstep?" The man squared his shoulders, trying to loom taller. "We've been given authorization to handle problem houses like yours. Your lawn, your porch light, even your parking. None of it's up to code. You'll face fines if you don't comply." Behind him, the other two shifted uncomfortably, like soldiers waiting for orders they didn't understand. Their uniforms didn't match, their boots scuffed, their belts half empty. They weren't trained. They weren't official. They were playing dress up with dangerous intentions. Sarah stepped beside me, her voice calm but firm. "This isn't how the HOA works. If you have a real complaint, put it in writing. Otherwise, you need to leave." The leader's jaw twitched. He glanced at his buddies, then sneered. "You should teach your wife not to interrupt official business." His words dripped with condescension, and I felt the air shift around us. Neighbors were gathering on lawns, peeking from windows. Everyone had seen these men prowling the neighborhood, and now they wanted to see how far they'd go. I kept my voice even, low enough that only he could hear. "You've got one chance. Walk away before you make the biggest mistake of your life." But instead of backing down, he puffed out his chest, looking for dominance. "You think you're tough. We don't take orders from nobodies." The tension thickened. Sarah reached for my arm, her touch steady but worried. "Please, let's not escalate this," she whispered. I gave her a reassuring glance, but deep inside, I could feel the familiar switch flipping. That instinct I thought I'd buried, the one that woke when danger stepped too close to my family. The leader smirked at me, mistaking my silence for weakness. He didn't realize that silence, in my world, meant I was already preparing. And when he finally crossed the line, there would be no going back. The leader's smirk widened as he stepped closer, closing the gap between us. His cheap badge caught the sunlight, flashing like it meant something. Sarah didn't move, standing tall even though I could see the fear in her eyes. "Sir, we've asked you politely," she said, her voice steady. "Leave our property now." That was when it happened. Quick, almost casual, his hand shot out, striking her across the cheek. The sound cracked through the air like a whip. For a second, time froze. The neighbors gasped. Mrs. Carter's hands flew to her mouth across the street. Somewhere a child started crying. The world narrowed to that single act, his palm against Sarah's face, the way her head snapped to the side, the red mark blooming instantly on her skin. My chest went cold. In combat, you learn to control emotions. Rage will get you killed. But this wasn't combat. This was my home, my wife, and the man standing in front of me had just crossed a line he would never come back from. Sarah steadied herself, tears welling but refusing to fall. She touched her cheek with trembling fingers and looked at me. She didn't have to say a word. I saw everything in her eyes, pain, fear, but also trust. She knew what was coming. I stepped forward, my voice a low growl. "You just made the biggest mistake of your life." The leader sneered, trying to hide the flicker of doubt in his eyes. His friends shifted nervously, suddenly less sure about the game they were playing. Neighbors murmured louder. Phones raised now, recording. They'd wanted to know who these men really were. Soon, they'd have their answer. I rolled my shoulders once, loosening the tension, my body already sliding into a stance that felt as natural as breathing. Years of training clicked into place. The fight hadn't started yet, but in my mind, it was already over. The leader barely had time to register the shift in my posture before I moved. Years of training don't disappear. They lie dormant, waiting for the spark. His spark had been the slap. I grabbed his wrist before he could retract it, twisting it downward with practiced precision. The crack of his tendons straining echoed louder than his scream. His knees buckled, and I shoved him into the porch rail, pinning him like an insect under glass. The two others snapped into action, but it was sloppy, uncoordinated. One lunged at me with a clumsy swing, telegraphed from a mile away. I released the leader, sidestepped, and drove my elbow into the attacker's ribs. He wheezed like a deflated tire, collapsing against the siding. The third man hesitated. His eyes darted from me to the gathering crowd, then to his so called leader groaning on the ground. Hesitation is weakness. I advanced before he could make a decision. He pulled something from his belt. Pepper spray, maybe. But his grip trembled. I swatted it away and planted my fist squarely into his sternum. He stumbled backward, gasping for breath as if the air itself had betrayed him. The leader recovered enough to stagger upright, rage burning in his eyes. He charged, fists flailing, but his movements were wide, desperate. I ducked under his swing and swept his legs out from under him. He hit the ground hard, the breath exploding from his lungs. "Stay down," I warned, my voice steady, deadly calm. But men like him never listen. He tried to rise again. This time, I met him halfway, driving a knee into his chest and pressing him to the pavement. His face twisted with shock as he realized just how outmatched he was. Around us, neighbors were shouting now. Cheers, gasps, the chaos of a crowd watching justice unfold. Phones were raised high, recording every second. These impostors had thrived on fear and secrecy, but now their lies were unraveling in the harsh light of day. The second man, clutching his ribs, tried to crawl away. I caught his ankle and yanked him back. He whimpered, begging under his breath. "Please, man, we were just trying to." "Shut up," I snapped, tossing him aside. Intentions didn't matter anymore. They had laid hands on my wife. That erased any excuses. The third one, still coughing, finally managed to stagger to his feet. He glanced at the crowd, then bolted down the sidewalk. The neighbors jeered, some chasing after him with cameras rolling. His escape wasn't freedom, it was humiliation, and soon, legal chains. I turned back to the leader, still pinned under my knee. His bravado had drained away, leaving only fear. "We're done," I said, leaning close so only he could hear. "Next time you think about pretending to be something you're not, remember this moment. Remember how it feels to lose." I released him, standing tall, breathing steady. My knuckles stung, my heart thundered, but I was in control. That's the difference between training and pretending. Sarah rushed to my side, her hand gripping mine, her eyes brimming with both relief and pride. The red mark on her cheek burned brighter than any wound I'd taken in combat. I kissed her forehead softly, whispering, "It's over." But deep down, I knew it wasn't over yet. This was only the beginning of their reckoning. Sirens echoed down the street minutes later, flashing red and blue washing over the scene. Real law enforcement pulled up fast, their presence slicing through the chaos like a blade. The crowd of neighbors parted, eager to hand over the story they had just witnessed. The leader of the fake HOA lay sprawled on the pavement, clutching his chest, still wheezing. His buddy groaned against the porch rail, while the third had been dragged back by neighbors, shoved forward like a prisoner of war. All three looked pitiful now, stripped of their borrowed authority, masks of bravado shattered. Two officers approached me first, calm but alert. "Sir, are you the homeowner?" one asked, eyeing the scene. I nodded, keeping my hands visible, my breathing even. They'd seen enough fights to recognize the difference between a victim and a thug. Neighbors rushed to speak over each other, voices overlapping in a frenzy. "They've been harassing us for weeks. Those men aren't with the HOA. We caught everything on video." Phones were shoved forward, screens glowing with proof. The officers separated the impostors, questioning them one by one. Within minutes, the truth came out. They weren't security, weren't hired by anyone. They were ex-cons, running a scam to squeeze money out of homeowners, collecting fines for fake violations. They'd already pocketed thousands from frightened residents too scared to push back. The real HOA representative arrived soon after, a balding man in a crisp polo, his face pale with disbelief. "We never authorized this," he stammered, shaking his head. "These men have nothing to do with us." Sarah stood beside me, silent, her cheek still red but her chin lifted high. She slipped her hand into mine, squeezing gently. In that moment, I saw pride in her eyes. Pride that I had stood between her and danger, pride that we hadn't bowed to fear. As the impostors were cuffed and shoved into squad cars, the neighbors clapped, some cheering outright. For the first time in weeks, our street felt safe again. That night, after the sirens faded and the neighbors drifted back to their homes, our house finally felt quiet again. Sarah sat on the couch, an ice pack pressed gently to her cheek. I sat beside her, holding her hand, the weight of everything settling over us like dust after a storm. For years, I had lived by the code of the team's discipline, control, and readiness. But that day reminded me of something even deeper, that all the training in the world means nothing if you don't use it to protect the people you love most. Sarah looked at me, her voice soft but steady. "I knew you'd keep me safe," she whispered. Her words cut through me sharper than any blade, because they reminded me why I walked away from the chaos of war. I wanted her trust to never be shaken. I thought about the impostors. They weren't warriors, not even close. They were cowards, hiding behind fake authority, using fear to bully good people. But bullies always make the same mistake. They underestimate the strength of those they target. To my neighbors, I wasn't just the quiet guy at the end of the street anymore. They saw me fight for my family, for all of us. And in their eyes, I saw gratitude. Maybe even a little hope. Peace is fragile. It can be broken by lies, by greed, by people pretending to be what they're not. But strength, the kind born from loyalty and love, will always outlast fear. As I kissed Sarah's forehead that night, I promised myself one thing. If anyone ever tried to bring chaos to this home again, they'd learn the same lesson those fakes did. Some battles find you, but you decide how they end.